is equal to guest user number, like this. And then if this here results as true, so if these two numbers are the same, we can write out a message to our user, and that message is going to be, let's say, correct, like this. So our user has guessed correctly. But in a situation where this here results as false, we can use our else statement. And in this else situation, let's write out a different message to our user. So let's say cout, and then inside these quotation marks, let's say failed, like this. So that in the case where these two are the same number, we can write out to our user that he has guessed correctly, and then in a situation where these two are not the same, we can write out to our user that he has failed in guessing. So if I run my program now, you see that it expects our host user to enter a number, and I'm going in this situation to take the role of both host and guest user. So I'm going to enter 7, for example, and then you see that that 7 number has been deleted from our console because of this command here. And now our program expects our guest user to enter his number. And I even forgot what number I entered. So let's say that our host user has entered, for example, 11. And you see that our program says you have failed, so you haven't guessed correctly. And one more time, let's enter for our host user number 5, for example, and then let's say that our guest user also says number 5, and our program says you have guessed correctly. So this is one potential solution for this problem, but I wanted to show you how you can solve this problem using ternary operator. And now I'm going to comment this code here, like this. So this is a comment for multiple lines of code. And let's really translate this part of code here into a ternary operator, like this. Okay, so how does the ternary operator work? Well, it is the only operator that takes 3 operands or works on 3 operands, and the first operand is going to be a condition. So I'm going to copy this condition here, which is our host user number equal to our guest user number? So that is going to be the first operand. And after that first operand, we need to put this question mark. And then after this question mark, we have the following behavior. If this expression here, so if this condition here is true, we are going to execute one line of code, or actually one part of code, and that is going to be this line here. But in the situation where this here results as false, we are going to execute whatever we put after this column sign. So that is going to be our cout failed, like this. And this is really the syntax for our ternary operator. And as you can see, it really is a shorter form of if-else statement. So this line of code really means, please check this condition here, and if this condition here results as true, execute this part of code here, but if this code here results as false, please execute whatever I put after my column sign. So that is going to be our cout failed. And now if I run the program, it asks again for our host user to enter the number. Let's enter number 9, for example. And then our guest user has to guess the number. So let's enter, for example, number 3. And you can see that our program says to our guest user that he has failed in guessing. So there are a couple of ways in which you can really upgrade this program, and I'm going to give you a few ideas. And the first one is, for example, you don't have to use int type here. So you can use different data type. You can guess characters, or you can guess even strings if you know how to. And if some of you want to play with that and try that on their own and you get it right, make sure to paste that code in the comments down below, and I'm going to check it. And if you get it right, I'm going to pin that comment up so that everyone else can see it. So that would be one way of upgrading this program. Another way to upgrade this program is to make it easier to your guest user. And how do I mean easier? Well, you can really limit your host user to enter a number that is going to be in a certain interval. For example, you can say to your host user that he can enter only a number that is going to be between, let's say, 1 and 15 or 50. It depends on how difficult you want to make it to your guest user. And that will be one way also of upgrading this program. And another, and the best way of upgrading this program, is going to be when we learn loops. And when we do that, I'm going to link the video here. And how you can upgrade this program using loops. Well, you can give your guest user multiple attempts. So you can say, for example, let my guest user guess 3 times or 5 times before I say game over, you have failed. Okay, so I hope that you have liked this video, and if you did, make sure to subscribe to my channel, share it with your friends and with other people that would like to learn programming, and I'm going to see you in my next video. Bye. Hi guys, welcome to my channel. Welcome to another C++ for Beginners tutorial. And I'm really excited for making this video because this video is going to be a milestone. And in this video, I'm going to show you how you can build your own calculator application. So if you have watched my previous videos and you are also watching this one and you build this application together with me, you should really feel proud of yourself because you have made a great progress. So let's build that application now. Here I have opened my Visual Studio, and let's very quickly explain what we want to do before we start write code. So I want my user to enter 2 numbers and also operation sign, and then depending on those 2 numbers and that operation, we want to calculate the result and then write that result to our user. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to declare variables that are going to hold those numbers and that operation sign. And since we want our user to be able to enter decimal point numbers, so not only integers, but decimal point numbers as well, we are going to declare variables that can hold decimal point numbers, and those can be float and double. So let's declare float variable, for example, and let's call it num1, which is going to hold our first number, and also another one, which is going to be called number2 and hold our second number. And after we have declared these 2, let's also declare a variable that is going to hold our operation sign. And since that is a character, we need to use a character type for that variable. So let's say char, and let's call that variable operation. Like this. Okay. And now, after we have created these 3 variables, we can really allow our user to enter his numbers and his operation. And we want to do that in the following order. So we want to say cin, and then first our user has to enter the first number, and then after that we want our user to enter the operation sign. So let's say operation like this, and after that our user has to enter the second number. And this window here, guys, this is called IntelliSense, and it really makes your code writing easier. So you can navigate this list here using your arrows, and then you can also use tab key so that it finishes your variable name for you if you want that. Okay, so now we have entered our first number, our operation, and then our second number as well, like this. And another thing that I want to write out to my user, because this is going to be the best calculator ever, let's write that title to our user. So let's write here, before he enters anything, a quick title. So let's say cout, and then let's say that it's going to be called Code Beauty Calculator. You can call yours whatever you want. So like this, and let's add these here so that it looks prettier. Okay, and now if I run my program, well, you see that it really looks like this. And now we are able to enter 1 number. After that, we want our user to enter operation like this, and then we want to enter the second number like this. And then after we press enter, our program should really calculate the result of this operation. In this current situation, it is not really doing anything else because we haven't written code for that. Okay, so Now let's solve this problem that we have here. So at this point, you should really have an idea yourself on how to solve this problem using if-else statements and also nested if-else statements. So if you're not familiar with those, I'm going to link one of my previous videos here. So make sure to watch that video as well. But in this video, I want to show you the more appropriate way for solving this particular problem. And that is going to be using switch case statement. So what is switch case statement? Well, switch case statement is, as well as if-else statement, used when you want to execute a block of code depending on a certain condition, so depending on a value of a certain variable. But switch case statement is particularly used in a situation where that variable can potentially hold a lot of different values. And if you look at our operation variable here, you should really notice that this variable can hold 6 different values. And what are those 6? Well, our user can decide to enter operation for adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing, modulating, and then what if our user does not really want to use our application, but he wants to hack it? So if he decides that he doesn't want to enter one of these 5, but he really enters some non-valid arithmetic operation, we should also cover that case. So we should really, as programmers, predict all these 6 situations and cover all these 6 cases. I'm going to add one end line here so that my text is formatted nicely. And then let's really show how this switch case statement is used. So the first thing that I want to write is switch, like this. And then if you press tab, you see that you are getting some default syntax for this switch case. For now, I'm going to delete that, and I want to show you how you can really write that yourself. And inside these parentheses here, I want to write out the name of my variable that I want to switch through or switch on. And that is going to be my operation variable, because depending on the value of this operation variable, we are going to perform a different calculation on these 2 number variables. So I'm going to say here operation, and then in these curly brackets here, we really want to cover all our cases. So the first case, let's say that our first case is going to be a situation where our user enters minus operator. So I'm going to use these single quotes, and then inside these single quotes, I'm putting the value that our variable can potentially hold, and that is this minus operator here. And after that, I'm going to add this column sign here, like this. And then after this column sign, I really want to put out whatever code I need to execute in the case that our operation corresponds to this sign here. And what I want to execute in this case is I want to say cout, and let's write out our first number, and then let's write out our operation. And then let's write out our second number so that our user really gets a nicely formatted text. And after that, I'm going to add this is equal to sign. And here we are going to put really our result. And that result is going to be our first number minus, because our user has entered this minus. So our first number minus our second number. So let's write out number 1 minus number 2, like this. And after we have covered this first case, we need to add one more keyword, and that is going to be break. And this break keyword is really used so that our switch case statement knows where our first case ends. So I'm saying here, whenever my operation is equal to this sign here, you are going to execute this code, and you should really stop executing that case when you come to this break statement. Okay, so this is going to be our first case. Our second case is going to be a situation where our user, let's say, enters this plus sign. And in that situation, we really want to write out to our user this text here. So the same text, we want to really write out our first number plus, in this case, our second number, and then is equal to, and then we are going to add really this calculation here. So number 1 plus number 2, like this. And in this situation as well, we want to add this break statement at the end, like this. Okay, so these are two potential cases. And now I'm going to really write out the rest of them. So I have written out these remaining cases. And in each of these cases, we really want to write out to our user his first number, after that his operation, second number, and then this equal sign. And then in each of these cases, we are performing adequate calculation. So we are performing that operation that our user has entered and writing that result out to our user. And after each of these cases, we really need to put this break statement. And you really have to put this break statement, because if you don't, you are going to get your program to behave as you don't want it to. And as you can see in this situation here, so in this situation where we are trying to modulate two numbers, we are getting an error. And if we hover over this number here, you can see that our error says expression must have integral or unscoped enum type. What does that mean? Well, if you haven't watched my video on operators, I suggest you to do so. I'm going to link it here. And here I'm quickly going to explain what is happening. So this operation here, this modulo operation, is operation that is really going to give you a remainder after dividing two whole numbers. And since this number here and this number here are of type float, we really cannot perform this calculation on these two variables. So what we have to do is we first have to check whether this number is really an integer number, whether it's a whole number, and this number as well. And since our float can hold decimal point numbers and integers as well, we really, in certain situations only, can perform this modulating operation. And let me explain what I mean by this, that our float can hold decimal point numbers and integers as well. Well, this variable here, this number variable, can really have value of 5.5, for example, but it can hold as well value of 5.0, which is really integer value, so it's 5 only. So now what we have to do is following. I'm going to delete this line here. And we first have to check whether both of these numbers are integers, and in that situation only we can perform this calculation. But in a situation where one of these two or both of them are not integers, we are going to write out to our user that that operation is not valid. So I'm deleting this code here. And then let's create two variables. So let's create a variable of type bool, and let's call it is num1 integer. So this variable is going to hold a value that is going to tell us is our number 1 integer value. And let's also create another variable that is going to be called is num2 int. And as well, this variable is going to tell us whether our number 2 is integer. And let's develop now an algorithm so that we can know whether our number 1 or number 2 is integer number. And I'm going to ask you to write your solutions in the comments down below. So pause the video, think about it, and then write your solution. And without using any already made functions, as programmers, as engineers, you should really be able to figure out the solution on your own. So applying the knowledge that you have gotten from my previous videos, or this one, but I'm going to say from my previous videos. So pause the video and write your solution. So this question is not really a question of programming, it's more of a question of thinking in a logical way. And if you remember when we were talking about casting operators, we said that a casting operator is used to convert one data type into the other. And I'm going to link that video here. If you haven't watched it, make sure to do so. And here we are going to try to convert our floating point number, so our number 1 and our number 2, into integer data type, so into integer number. And how we are going to do that? Well, we are really going to say int, so this here is going to cast whatever we put after it into int type. and we are going to say, please try to convert my number 1 into integer. And how does this work? Well, for example, if you have a number 1 that holds value of 5.7, when you try to convert that value into integer, what it does really, it says that 5.7, so that 0.7 part really, bye-bye. I'm going to take only this 5 part, so only this whole part of a number. So in that situation, we are really going to get only 5 from this 5.7 floating point number. So what I'm going to say now is I'm going to say whatever this expression here, this casting operation results with, I'm going to really try to compare that with the initial value of my number 1 variable. So I'm going to say num1 is my converted number 1, so converted to integer, equal to number 1, like this. And how does this calculation here work? Well, as I said, for example, if you have a number 1 that holds a value of 5.0, so 5.0, this part here is really going to take this 0.0 part of a number and delete it. It's going to keep only this 5, so only this whole part of a number. And after that, we have this is equal to operator, and then we are trying to really check whether that is equal to 5.0. And the result of this is going to be true. So with this here, we have checked really whether our number is going to be equal to our floating point number. So this result here, we are going to assign this value to our is number 1 integer variable. So here I'm going to say, please assign the result of this operation to our is number 1 integer variable, like this. And let's put this expression here, so this whole expression inside these parentheses, so that we really can see that this is an expression, and the result of this expression should be assigned to this is number 1 int variable. And now we are going to do the same for our is number 2. So I'm going to say is number 2 integer, and we are going to say that that is equal to, I'm trying to convert my number 2 to int, and then compare that to my float number 2. And after this, we really can now do our algorithm to perform this modulo, where it is this modulo operation on our two numbers in the case where both of them are integers. So here I'm going to say if is my number 1 int, and then also is my number 2 int, like this. In this situation here, I'm going to perform this modulo operation. And as you can see here, I have used only these two Boolean values here in this expression. So I didn't say, please check is my number 1 int equal to true, like this. Nor I have said, please check is my number 2 equal to true, like this. Because this part here, and this part here are really redundant. And what this expression here translates in, it translates in is true equal to true, and that is really redundant. So I'm going to remove this part here and this part here, and it should work fine like this for Boolean values, so Boolean variables. And in this situation here, where both of these are integers, we really can perform this modulo operation. So in this situation here, I'm going to take this code and I'm going to copy it like this. And I'm going to say, please write out my number 1, then my operation, then my number 2 is equal to sign. And then here I'm going to put adequate calculation. So I'm going to say, take my number 1, convert it to int, and then modulate that with my number 2 that is as well converted to int, like this. Okay, so in this situation where both of these are integers, we are going to really write out the result of modulating operation to our user, Let's add empty space here and here as well. But in the situation where one of these two is not integer or both of them are not integers, I'm going to say else. And in that situation, I'm really going to write out to my user that this operation is not valid. So let's say just not valid, like this. So in any of these two situations, whether we write out this line of code here or this line of code here, after that we are going to come here, and here we have to put our break statement, like this. So after each case comes break. And now we can really test this part of code here that we have written. So if I run my program, the first thing that I want to test is, let's say 5.5 plus 2.2. And we get the expected result, so 7.7. Let's run our program again. And this time I want to check whether my modulo operation is working as it should, because this code here is really specific. So let's say 5 modulo 2, like this. And as well, we have gotten correct result. And let's run our program one more time. And here I really want to trick my program and try to make it to modulate two numbers that are not whole numbers. So 5.2 modulated by 2. And as well, our program works as it should. So it says not valid operation. Okay. So if you have noticed, in this current situation, I really have to run my program each time that I want to perform a calculation. And that is because we haven't learned anything about iteration or loops so far. And those videos are coming, so make sure to subscribe to my channel and also click the bell icon so that you are notified when I publish those videos. And in that situation where we learn iteration and loops, we are really going to be able to run our programs indefinitely, which means to run our calculator application until we really decide to stop it. Okay, so after we have covered these 5 cases here, there is only one situation left to cover, and that is a situation where our user enters any other sign that is not one of these 5 here. And that situation we are really going to write like this. So we are going to say default. So in the case where our user enters operation that is not going to correspond to any of these 5 signs, we are going to execute our default situation. And here we really want to write out a message to the user that is trying to hack our program. So you can write whatever message you want to the user that is trying to hack the program that you have worked so hard to build. And I'm going to put here okay. You really can write out whatever you want to that type of user, like this. So in the case where our user has not entered this, nor this, nor this, nor this, nor this, which means our user has entered some other sign, we really want to write out not valid operation. And let's test now our default case. So I'm going to run the program. And I'm going to take the role of a malicious user that is going to try to hack your application. And I'm going to say, please try to perform this calculation here. So 5Z9. Not really. You have been smart enough to predict his malicious behavior. And you have said, if you haven't put here a valid arithmetic operation, then no, I cannot help you. This is not a valid operation. And there is really one thing that you have been wondering about for the most part of this video, and that is this break statement here. So why I have said that after each case you have to put break. And now you want me to explain that, do you? Do you really? Wouldn't that be a spoiler for a situation where you decide on your own to delete this break statement here and then run your program, even though I have said not to, and you enter some calculation and you remember that I have said that you are going to get unexpected behavior, but was she lying? Was she not? And then you decide to execute this calculation and boom, here's your unexpected behavior. So what has happened here? Well, your program has really recognized that this operation here that you have entered is this minus operation. And after that, it has written out this number 1, so 7, and then operation minus, and then this number 2, 5, is equal to, and then it has calculated number 1 minus number 2, which is 7 minus 5, and that is equal to 2. And after that, it has really continued executing other cases, which means it has come to this line here, and then it has written one more time your number 1 minus number 2, so 7 minus 5 is equal to, and then it has performed this number 1 plus number 2 calculation, and 7 plus 5 is going to be equal to 12. And then it has come to this first break command, and it has stopped the execution of your switch case. So why has this happened? It has happened because you haven't put this break command here, and in that case your program is really going to be executing your cases until it comes to the first break command. And if you have noticed here, in this default situation, I haven't really put any breaks. You can as well put your break statement here. You can say break here, but even if you didn't put your break here, and your program really tries to execute something after this line here, there is really nothing to execute, so you are not going to get a problem in this situation here. I hope that you liked this video and that you have built your own calculator application, and if you did, make sure to subscribe to my channel and click the bell icon as well. Share this video with anyone who would like to learn programming, and I'm going to see you in my next video. Bye! Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. Welcome to another video of C++ for beginners. And in this video I wanted to deepen your knowledge of switch case. So if you're not familiar with switch case at all, if you haven't watched my previous video, you definitely have to do that. The link is going to be here. And in this video I wanted to give you some more examples that you can practice on and introduce some things that I haven't mentioned in my previous video as well. So in this video, we are going to build a program that is going to require from our user to enter a year and a month as well. And then our program has to write out how many days there is in that month. So how we are going to do that, let's see. But first, you have to subscribe to my channel and like this video and also share it with your friends. As I explained, there are two things that we need from our user to enter, and those are going to be month and year. So let's create two variables. Let's say year and month, like this. And now I'm going to write out the message to my user so that he knows that he should enter those two values. So year, and after that, please enter month, like this. And let's store now the values that our user enters. So the first one is going to be stored inside our year variable, and then the second one is going to be stored inside our month variable. And now we have really covered everything that we need from our user. Now our program has to check these two variables and then decide how many days there is in that month of that year. And we are going to do that using switch case statement. But there is one thing that I want to mention before we start write our switch case. And that is, you have to take in consideration that there are years that are leap years and that have one day more than the year that is not a leap year. And there is a rule for that. So I'm going to copy the rule that is going to help us to determine whether a year is a leap year or not. And that is this rule here. So any year that when modulated by 4 gives the result of 0, and at the same time that year modulated by 100 is not equal to 0, or a year, so that same year when modulated by 400 is going to give the result of 0. And this here is going to be a definition for our leap year, which means a year that has 366 days, or a February inside this year has 29 days. That's why we need this rule here. So now let's write out our switch case statement. And if you haven't watched my video on switch case statement, I am going to link it here one more time because you really need to understand the switch case. And then you can come back to this video and deepen your knowledge on switch case. So switch, this is going to be the syntax of our switch case, but I'm going to delete this default syntax. We want to write it ourselves. So inside these parentheses here, I'm going to put the variable that we are going to switch through, and that is going to be our month variable, like this. So whichever value our user has entered for our month, we are going to cover all the potential values that our month can hold in our cases. So the first case that I want to cover is going to be the most specific one, and that is going to be our February, which means second month. So I'm going to say in the case that this month variable is equal to 2, which means that our user is requesting from us to determine how many days our February month has. We really, in this case, need to check whether that year is a leap year or not. And then if that year is a leap year, that means that our February has 29 days. And if not, which means if this condition here is not true, that means that our second month has 28 days. So I'm going to copy this expression here, this condition. And also, if you are not familiar with ternary operator, you have to watch that video, because in this video we are going to use that ternary operator. You can do it as well with if-else statement, but I want you to practice also this, because you are going to actually come across it in your programming career. So here I'm putting this condition for a leap year, and I'm going to say this question mark, and then I'm going to say if this here is true, you have to write out this line of code. So you have to write out cout, and if this condition here is true, that means that our year is a leap year, which means that our February, our second month, has 29 days. So let's say 29 days month, like this. Okay. And so that is in the situation where this here is true. And in the situation where this expression here results as false, I'm going to put here a column sign, and then I'm going to write out a different message, and that is going to be that this second month, in the case where a year is not a leap year, has actually 28 days. So after we have written this expression here, so this ternary operator, we have really written out how many days there is in our February month, and after each case I have to put break. So in this case as well, I'm going to put our break command after it. And with this example, with this case here, we have really covered our second month, which was the most specific one. Now we are left to cover the remaining months, which means ones that have 31 days and also ones that have 30 days. And here I'm going to show you something that I haven't shown you before. Let me scroll this code like this, maybe. Okay. And then there are some months that contain 30 days and some that contain 31 days. And the ones that contain 30 days are following. So I'm going to write out case like this. And then the first month that contains 30 days is going to be April, so fourth month. And then also our sixth month contains 30 days. And then also, let's see, fourth, sixth, ninth, and then November as well, like this. And here we have written out really all the months that contain 30 days. Okay, and now I'm going to, at the end, so at this case here, write out a message. Let me copy this, and I'm going to paste it, and I'm going to say 30 days month, like this. Okay, and I'm going to put break command here as well. So let me explain this part of code here, because we haven't seen this part of code here before. This break statement, what it does is when your program execution actually comes to this case here, it says, okay, my month is equal to 2, so I'm going to execute this part of code here. And then it comes to this break command. And this break command really breaks the execution of your switch, which means that when your program comes to the first break command, it is going to stop the execution of your switch there, which means that it is not going to check any more cases. And because of that, you can really here, so you can put more than 1 month. You can put all the months that have 30 days, like this. And then you can write out the same message and put one break command at the end. And how that is going to really behave inside your program, in the case where a user enters, for example, month 6, your program is going to check whether that month is equal to 2, and it's not going to be. Then it's going to check whether your month is equal to 4, not as well. And then it's going to come here and say, okay, this is 6th month that our user has entered. So please execute whatever code you find until you come to the first break. And that is going to be this here, which is empty, so nothing. And then this here, which is as well empty, so nothing. And then it comes to this code here. And that line, so this code here, contains this cout message, 30 days month. So it is going to write out this. And then it really comes to this first break command, and it breaks your switch, which means that it is not going to check any other cases that come after this break. Okay, so in any case, whether your user enters month 4 or 6 or 9 or 11, your program is going to execute this line here and then break your switch. So with this part of code here, we have really covered all months that have 30 days, and now we are left to cover the ones that have 31 days. And those are months, let's see, that is our January, and then our 3rd month, and our 5th, and our 7th month, like this. Let me scroll it a little bit more. Okay, and then we have as well case 8 and case 10, and as well our December has 31 days. So there are 7 months that have 31 days, 5 months that have 30 days, and 1 month that has 28 or 29 days. And in this line here, we are going to write out a message that is going to say 31 days month. And as well here we have to put our break command like this. Okay, so I am going to run my program now and show you how this program behaves. So our program is asking us to enter a year and a month. Let's say a year is going to be 2020, which is current year, and then a month is going to be, let's see, it's April, so 4th, and it says that it is a 30-day month, which is April has 30 days. And let's run our program one more time, and let's say 2020 again, and let's say that we want to check our 2nd month, and it says that February of 2020 has 29 days, which is correct as well. And there is really one more situation that I want to cover, and that is going to be a situation where our user enters a number that is not a valid month number. And that situation I'm going to cover with my default statement. So I'm going to write out default. And in this default case as well, I want to write out a message to my user like this. And inside here, I'm going to say not valid, which means that our user has not entered a valid month number. So let's run our program, and if I enter year 2020, and for a month, let's say -5, for example, you see that our program has written out not valid. Okay, so I hope that you have liked this video, and if you did, make sure to subscribe to my channel and share it with anyone who would like to learn programming as well. And today is May the 2nd. That's when I'm filming this video. I don't know when I'm going to publish it, probably in a couple of days. And currently we are a little bit over 900 people. So let's see how fast this channel can grow. Thanks for watching, and I'm going to see you in my next video. Bye. Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. Welcome to another video of C++ for beginners. And in this video, I wanted to talk about loops, more specifically about while loop. So what are loops? What are they used for? How they are used? Well, loops are used when you want to execute a block of your code multiple times while a certain condition is true, which means you give a certain condition to your loop and you say you are going to execute this block of code while this condition here is true. So however many times it is necessary. And one thing that I want to mention before we start on our example is the following. So selection, sequencing, and iteration. Those three are three main building blocks of programming languages, and when you really learn and understand those three, you should be able to solve any logical programming problem. And in this video, we are going to talk about iteration. We have already talked about sequencing and selection in my previous videos. So what is sequencing? Well, that means that your code is executed sequentially, which means one line after the other. And then selection, that would be really when you want to select one part of the code rather than the another one, which means you are going to tell to your program under a certain situation it really has to select which block of code it is going to execute. The same would be when you, for example, come to a crossroad and then you have multiple ways in front of you, but you really have to select which one you are going to take, because you cannot take all of them. And then iteration is going to be really iterating or executing multiple times a certain block of code, certain part of code, while a certain condition is true. So while a certain condition is fulfilled, you are going to execute the same block of code. So let's see our example now. So I'm going to paste the text of my program here, and this is our task. So it says that we have to write out all the numbers between 100 and 500 that are divisible by 3 and by 5. And how we are going to do that. First, I want to explain you the algorithm, so how we are going to solve this problem, and then we are going to translate that algorithm into our code. So this interval here, so this 100 to 500 interval, we are really going to iterate through all of the numbers of this interval, and we are going to do that using while loop. And then for each of those numbers, so for each value of our counter, we are going to check whether that counter value can be divided by 3 and by 5. And if yes, we will write out that value. If no, we are just going to continue to the next iteration. So as I already said, we are going to use while loop to solve this problem. And we are going to start our while loop with the counter value of 100, and in each iteration we are going to really increase the value of our counter, so 101, 102, and 3, and we are going to stop the execution of our while loop when this counter value comes from 100 to 501, which means 500 value of counter is going to be our last iteration through our loop. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to really declare a variable that is going to hold our current counter value. So I'm going to call it int counter, like this. And initially, I'm going to set the value of my counter to 100. Okay, so this is our initial value of our counter. And then let's see what is the syntax of our while loop. So we write out while, like this. And then in these parentheses, we are going to put our condition. So how long our loop is going to execute. And then in these braces here, so in this curly brackets, we are going to put which block of code our while loop is going to execute while this condition here is fulfilled. And let's now fill these parentheses here. So as I've said, our counter has to go from 100 to 500, which means since it starts on 100 here, we have to say to our while loop that the execution of this block of code here really has to stop when our counter comes to 500 or 501. 500 is still valid value. So that we are going to say like this. So we are going to say counter, like this. And then we are going to say there are two ways to write this condition. The first one is to say while our counter is less or equal to 500, or you could as well said while our counter is less than 501. So that is a valid situation while you're executing your loop. So while your counter is less than 501, or while your counter is less or equal to 500. I prefer it this way, but whichever way you put it is going to work. So now that we have put this condition here, we really can write out this code that comes in this while loop block. So what we are going to execute while this condition here is true. And that is going to be following. Inside this block of code here, we really have to check whether our current value of our counter is divisible by 3 and by 5. And if it is, we have to write out that number to our user. If no, we just need to continue to our next iteration of our loop. And how we can check whether this counter value can be divided by 3 and by 5. Well, we use modulo operation for that. If you haven't watched my video on operators, I'm going to link it here. Make sure to watch it. And here we really put the following. So we can say if, and also if you're not familiar with if statement, going to link it here. So if our counter value, so our current value of our counter, after you modulate it with 3, if the result of that is 0, that means that our number, so our counter, is divisible by 3. And we also have to check whether our counter is divisible by 5. As well, we use this modulo operation here. And we say whether our counter modulated by 5 is going to equal to 0. And if this condition here is fulfilled, we really have checked this part of our task. And if this part here is true, we have to write out that number. So in this situation here, I'm going to say cout, like this. And I'm going to put inside here, let's see, we are going to write out the value of our counter, like this. And we are going to write out is divisible, like this. And let's put one end line after this line of code here, because we are definitely going to have multiple lines. So we want our lines to be formatted nicely. Okay, so this part of code here has really covered this divisible by 3 and 5 and write out that number if it is divisible by 3 and by 5. And there is really one very important thing that you have to keep in mind each time that you write loops. And that is the following. So you have to give your loop a way so that it can stop executing this block of code here. So under a certain condition, it really needs to leave this block of code here, because if you don't do that, you are going to end up with an infinite loop. You are really going to lock your program in an infinite loop situation. And this code here, this loop here that we have written, this is really an infinite loop. So let me prove that. I'm going to run my program, and as you can see, the console is empty. So I enter any value, enter whatever. It is not really reacting. And why has that happened? Well, your counter value starts with 100, and then it comes to your while loop, and your while loop checks this condition here. So it checks whether your 100 is less or equal to 500, and the answer to that is yes, which means that your program execution can enter this block of code here, so it can start executing your loop. And then it comes here, and it says, please check whether my counter, which is 100, is divisible by 3, and the answer is no. So this part of code here is not even going to be checked because of the nature of this AND operator. It really needs both of these operands to be true in order for this expression here to be true, because this here is not true, it's false. 100 is not divisible by 3. It is not even going to check this condition here, and this line of code here is not ever going to be written. So after that, it comes here to this closed curly brace, and then because of the nature of while loop, when it comes here, it really goes back here. And then it checks again your value of your counter, whether that is less or equal to 500, but nothing has changed. Your counter value is still 100. And then it is going to enter again here, and then really repeat that process over and over again. And your program, because of that, is going to be locked inside an infinite loop. So let me prove that really, because here we have an empty console and you cannot see what is happening in the background. So I'm going to stop my program and I'm going to write out here, let's write out cout like this. And let's write out infinite loop. And if I run my program now, as you can see, your program has really entered in an infinite loop, and it is writing out this infinite loop text for infinite number of times. So as you can see, it says infinite loop. Okay, and this execution here is not really going to stop until your program's memory is full, and then it's going to crash. So whatever code indicates that you had some code here, it is not ever going to be executed. So I'm going to stop this here, and I'm going to delete this part of code here because we don't really need it. What we need is we need to put here a certain code that is going to help our loop to really stop the execution at a certain point. And the code that we need to put here is going to be really following. It's going to be counter plus plus, like this. What this code here is going to do, in each iteration, it is going to check whether this condition here is true. If yes, it is going to write out this part of code here. And then in each iteration, it is going to really increase the value of your counter by 1, which means in your first iteration, it's going to be 100. After that, it's going to be 101, 102, 103, and it is going to really go until it comes to 500. That is going to be the last iteration of your program. And then when it comes to 501, this condition here is not going to be true anymore. And then your loop is going to check really whether 501 is less or equal to 500. And the answer to that is not going to be no. So your program is going to really stop the execution of this loop and come here and then really stop your program. So if I run the program now, I'm going to prove that. Okay, so this has been executed very fast. And as you can see, this is the result of your program. It has really written out all the numbers that are divisible by 3 and by 5. And you can check all of these numbers using your calculator if you want. So with this expression here, with this counter plus plus, we have really both iterated through all the numbers between 100 and 500, because we check our counter value here. And then also we have really given a way to our loop to stop the execution of this block of code here when this counter value comes to 501. And this is the result of our program. Okay, so I hope that you have liked this video. Any questions that you have, write those in the comments down below and I'm going to answer those. Make sure to subscribe to my channel and share it with all your friends, anyone who would like to learn programming, and I'm going to see you in my next video. Bye. Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. Welcome to another video of C++ for beginners. Today I want to talk about while loop, and I have already made one video on this topic, and if you haven't watched that, I'm going to link it here, so make sure to do so. And why I'm making this video, because I really believe that watching one video and doing only one example is not going to be enough for you to really master a certain concept. It wasn't for me, it is not going to be for you as well, and that is completely okay. So we are going to show you how this while loop is used on one more example. And the program that I want to build today is going to be a program that has to count how many digits the number contains. So our user is going to enter a number, and then we are going to write a program that is going to count how many digits there are in that number. So let me copy the text of that program like this. and it says count digits of a number. So let's do the first thing that we know that we have to do and that we know how to do as well. So that is going to be write out a message to our user so that he enters that number, and then also allow him to enter that number. So I'm going to say cout, and then I'm going to say number like this, and then I'm going to allow my user to enter that number. Before I can enter it, I have to really declare a variable that is going to hold that number. So here I'm going to say int number like this, and then here, after we have written out this message to our user, we are going to say cin number like this. So after our user has entered his number, we really have stored it in our number variable, and now we are going to write out the program that is going to count the number of digits of this number here. So let's first see one specific situation that can happen, and that is going to be when our user enters number 0. So this number holds a value of 0. And in that situation, I'm just going to write out a condition. So I'm going to say if my number like this is equal to 0, in that situation, please just write out a message to my user like this: you have entered 0. Okay, like this. And I don't need semicolon here. This looks better. So this here is a situation where our user has entered number 0. And in that case, we just want to write out that he has entered 0. And now we are left with the main problem of this task, and that is to count the digits of the number that our user has entered. And that part I'm going to put in my else block, like this. And if you are not familiar with if-else statements, make sure to watch that video. It's going to be linked here. So here in this else block, I want to write the program that is going to count the digits of a number, which is not 0 definitely, because if we come here, then our number is definitely not 0. So how we are going to do that? Well, let me show you the algorithm on an example. Let's say that our user is going to enter a number 1325, for example. That is the number that our user enters. So how we are going to count the digits of this number? Well, first we are going to have a variable that is going to be called counter, like this. And initially we are going to set the value of that counter to 0. So that is initial count of our digits of number. And then we are going to use while loop to iterate through all the digits of this number. And in each iteration, we are going to do following. So we are going to come here, and then we are going to say, okay, take this last digit of my number and really remove it. I don't need it. And as well increase the number that my counter is holding. So increase the number of digits because we have removed one digit. And then in the next iteration, we are coming here and we are as well saying, okay, so take that last digit and increase my counter like this. And then in the next iteration, take the last digit, increase counter, and in the next as well, take last digit, increase counter, and then when we come next time, we really have nothing more to count. So there are no more digits left. Our number at this situation here is going to be equal to 0, and then we are going to know that there is nothing else to count. And then we are really going to leave our while loop, and we are going to write out the value that our counter variable is holding, which is at this situation 4. So let me show you how we can do that in our code. So I'm going to delete this part here. We don't need it anymore. And then here I'm going to write out the following. So as we explained already, first thing that we need to do is we need to create a variable that is going to be called counter, like this, or digits counter, however you prefer. And that variable, I'm going to assign a value of 0 initially. And after we have created this variable here, now we need our while loop. So while, like this, and then inside these parentheses here, we really write out a condition that our while loop is going to check each time that it wants to run, each time that it wants to iterate. And that condition here is really going to be, please check whether my number is greater than 0. Okay, so in any case where our number is greater than 0, our while loop is going to execute this block of code that I put inside these parentheses. And what we are going to put